Hello there. 2 years ago, I brought out this little book, Star Wars Archives, episodes 4 to 6. And since then, I've been working with George Lucas and with Lucasfilm to make this, the Star Wars Archives, episodes 1 to 3. I'm going to unbox it now. Here we have the book, nice and shiny and sparkly, like the last one. It's 600 pages, it's very big and heavy, like the last one. It smells brand new. And it's separated into 4 chapters and an introduction. Title page, table of contents. Fantastic. All right, it's got a foreword by George Lucas, which is all about digital technology and technology moving forward. When we started on the book, I wrote to George and I said, George, I think one of the major things about episodes 1 to 3 is that it's about the rise and development of digital technology. And George wrote back and he said, Paul, I think one of the main things about episodes 1 to 3 is about the rise of digital technology, so we should do that. That's one of the threads that goes through the book. We start with the first chapter on the special editions. It's called the special editions and all the images are about the special editions, but the text follows us through the development of digital technology right from Star Wars in 1977 through Indiana Jones, the different digital editing, and also through the development of VFX. The most surprising thing, in fact, I found out about the special editions was that there was so much restoration that needed to be done. 20 years after Star Wars came out, there was a lot of deterioration in the original prints. So it wasn't just George tweaking the films in order to make them more as he intended, but it was also a complete restoration of the whole movie, of every image. So what I've done is I've included in the first chapter images, concept, digital information about the changes that George made because he was unhappy with the original film and the way it came out. And, there are a few controversial pieces like Han Solo and Greedo and who shot first. Now, it was always George's intention for Greedo to shoot first and for Han Solo to shoot in self-defense. And in fact, I found a document here that actually says that on frame 52 is the approximate start mark for Greedo for his misfire, and on frame 57, 5 frames later, which is less than a quarter of a second, approximate start for mark for Han returning fire. So this was to clarify how this scene was to be played out as George intended, rather than the ambiguity that it was originally. Then we've got the second chapter on the Phantom Menace, which is 180 pages. Then we've got Attack of the Clones, another 180 pages through here. Then Revenge of the Sith, that's about another 180 pages. I wanted to maximize the amount of space we had for these movies because I found so much incredible material. So in the back we just have an index, bibliography, and acknowledgements and credits. So that's the format for the book. It's a big book, it's got enough for more than one story. So the first story is the plot of the movies, which is told through the images and through the captions. On Phantom Menace, we start with the development and pre-production. Here is some great images for alternative ideas for a version of Millennium Falcon. And then we follow the story with each scene and the development and behind the scenes concept art, models, computer printouts, computer models, so that the whole story of the movie is told. And that's done for each of the 3 movies. The second story is the story told in the text, which is an oral narrative, how things happened. That's the essential making of. The third story is the rise of digital technology. The development of digital technology is not just the development of CGI, it's not just the development of digital cameras, it's the development of the whole filmmaking process. From the camera, the pixels coming in, capturing the light, and then using those images in editing, and then projecting those images at the end. So it's pixel in to pixel out. And that took many, many years, a few decades, in order to be sorted out and developed. And this book follows that development, and it shows how integral George and his team and ILM, Lucasfilm, how everybody was involved in that and were pushing the boundaries of the technology. In Phantom Menace, they used a film camera because a digital camera wasn't available. Then the second film, Attack of the Clones, that's when they started using a digital camera from beginning to end. One of the things George wanted is he wanted me to talk to the people who had actually worked on the movie and been part of the development. So I talked to John Knoll and Dennis Muren, who were involved at ILM and doing a lot of the tricks, the software, everything that you needed to do in order to create CG. I also talked to Mike Blanchard, who was involved in the logistics of how do you set up all these different technologies and integrate them together, as well as Fred Meyers, of course, who was very involved in that. David Tattersall, the director of photography, he told me stories about the development of the camera and him testing the camera. All the faults that you would normally find in a digital camera, they knew all about it, and they tested the extremes of digital technology in order to get the best results they could with, the very first cameras. So all those stories are in here. They tell us all about it. And then by the time of Revenge of the Sith, we've got a fully integrated team that are using digital technology to its absolute extreme. The fourth arc, the last arc, is George's underlying ideas and philosophy for Star Wars, which isn't very often talked about, but is absolutely essential. So episode 1 is about symbiotic relationships. You have a planet, Naboo, and you have the two cultures living on the planet but living apart. And it's only by coming together, by acting together, that they can defeat the forces of darkness. The second movie then becomes about how democracy dies. It's about how people act selfishly instead of acting together. And in that way, that shows the downfall of democracy. And obviously the third one is about how the personal selfishness of Anakin Skywalker leads to the rise of the Empire. This book is about that transition to the dark side because of selfishness. And in that way, it complements episodes 4, 5 and 6, which are about the selfless nature of the characters and how they come back into the light. So George said that I should meet lots of people, interview them, find their stories, hear the stories, and include them in the book. And it was great because I managed to talk to Doug Chiang, where he told me about how he came into the project, what his ideas were behind the different designs. George requires a lot of ideas, and he requires all the technology, all aspects of a culture need to be designed. There's nothing exists already. You can't just like pull up images, off a database or, from books or whatever. So it's a lot of work for Doug and the design team. He said initially he would start on a page like this. He would do lots of little thumbnails, lots of different forms, for in this case, a droid tank. And then he would photocopy bits of these, enlarge them, and then he would start drawing. Now, the problem was that this would take a long time for him to do. He'd set himself 5 designs per day to deliver, which meant some very, very long days. So he stopped doing pages like this and would just do a big sketch onto each page and then do some light drawings from those. So this is quite unusual. This is quite early on in his process. And then that would become final design. George would develop that and comment on it. Then it would become a maquette, a little model. Then it would be built often into big models and used throughout the film. And that was actually quite surprising throughout all 3 movies how much model work there was done. Enormous models they built. Also, one of the joys of going through all the archives at the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, which is on the ranch. Also, I went through the archives of the Lucas Research Library, which hold all of George's papers, which was given access to, and also Lucasfilm archives as well on the ranch, which held all the production documents, and also all the photography was held at Lucasfilm at the Presidio, and I had complete access to everything, which was great. It was a great privilege, and I was so knocked out by so many of the designs and the artwork. Here there's some amazing images by Terrell Whitlatch I'd never seen before, and I've included as much as possible in the book. So I also had the opportunity of interviewing Ben Burtt, fantastic editor, fantastic sound designer, and he told me some great stories about when they began working on EditDroid and then later Havoc, and his experiences working on Young Indiana Jones, the TV series. And that's when they first started to experiment with digital editing, non-linear editing. So this involved doing things like if somebody blinked, stopping the eyes moving so that the eyes stayed open, and cutting characters out, enlarging them within the frame, making them smaller, taking two performances by 2 actors, different takes, and patching them together on the same frame. So all of this work was done before Star Wars, before Episode 1, and was done on Indiana Jones. And what's great is in these production documents that I found, you can actually see the notes given by George to the editors, so that that information was passed on not just to the editors but also to ILM. So another aspect that Ben was very much involved with was the animatics. Originally, George always liked to use footage in order to build up sequences. So in Star Wars he used original World War II aerial footage and put it together for the dogfights at the end of the movie. He used little animations for Empire Strikes Back, and then video cameras with little models for Return of the Jedi. But for this, it's a new idea, and it's the idea of taking video technology, very simple computer-generated images, in order to build up sequences. And they started doing this on Episode 1, and they used it throughout, really developed it to a very, very high level, a very high degree throughout the 3 movies. But this is basically what we call pre-visualization today, Pre-Viz. So this allowed George to plan everything And the great thing is that everybody could see this, same with the concept art, and everybody on set knew what was supposed to happen and how all the little bits and pieces fitted together to make the final movie. It was also a way of, if you've already made the decision, right, it made the filming process much quicker. And also it's information that you could pass on to ILM, and they had that information. They knew exactly what was expected and required. So it's an amazing tool, and it's also integral to George's philosophy of non-linear filmmaking. Now, normally you have pre-production, you plan stuff, you film it, you edit it, and do sound and images, etc. You finish the movie and it goes out. But what happens if during filming you come up with another great idea, but you haven't got Pre-Viz or you haven't got concepts or whatever, or likewise in post, you've got these great ideas and you know how you can move it around, but you've already filmed, etc. So for George I think revolutionised filmmaking by being a non-linear filmmaker, in that from the very beginning to the very end, to just before it's released to the cinemas, at any point during this process, he could change and rewrite, and use all the very best ideas. And then he would do a series of small filming, little bits and pieces in order to integrate and make all the transitions right. So I think that's a revolution in digital filmmaking. There's an incredible amount of planning that goes into each of these sequences. For the city chase in Episode II, Attack of the Clones, I found this great drawing where they showed the complete chase. Then for each part of that sequence, they had to build the computer models. You can see the lines showing the path of the vehicles and also the little camera angles, so that every single angle was planned out beforehand. On this document, you can see that each of those camera angles is shown in the document. I mean, this is meticulous planning. It's incredible, I think. For Revenge of the Sith, George's original idea was to begin the movie with 7 battles on 7 planets. And here we've got Eric Tiemann's drawing thumbnails for ideas for each of the battles. Nothing exists. So all of these had to be designed. And luckily I got to meet and interview Ryan Church and Eric Tiemann's in order to talk about this aspect. It's so much work. They start here with a ring world, crystal world here, a sinkhole world, which was originally going to be run by the space lemurs, but and that idea was dropped. A lagoon world, which became Kashyyyk with Han Solo and Chewbacca. Bridge world. It's amazing detail on each of the planets. Felucia, which is like a coral world, and Polis Master. The original idea was as an asteroid with a city inside it. And then we go into the story itself. The opening battle, as it developed, originally was much longer, and there were a lot of things that were filmed, planned. Here we've got a scene with Shakti, where she's going to be killed. Originally it was storyboarded, there's an animatic, and it was filmed, but ultimately cut. And we include a lot of that information in the book. I talked to George for 2 more days and also used quotes from some of the previous interviews I did with him. And George's point of view and his story is told throughout the book. So he talks about a lot of the underlying philosophy of the series. He talks about Sith Lords and who they are and what they do. He talks about midichlorians and the worlds. We do talk beyond these 3 movies, and George explains why he sold Lucasfilm in 2012 to Disney, and also he talks a little bit about his ideas, a few of his ideas for the 3rd trilogy. And but if you want to find that out, you're going to have to get the book. So, Star Wars Archives, episodes 1 to 3, 1999 to 2005. This is the book. I'm very proud of it, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.